Hello, my name is Professor Sylvester Carl Henderson, and I am so honored this early afternoon to be able to interview Dr. Nathaniel Jones III, Ph.D. Dr. Jones has had a plethora of wonderful positions, currently the president of Jones Consulting, the vice president of administrative services from LA Mission College, and is one of the commissioners for the Accrediting Commission for Community and Junior Colleges for California. Welcome, Dr. Jones.
Good evening, Professor Henderson. It's good to see you again.
Very much so. Thank you. Dr. Jones, could you introduce yourself to our digital media academic world? Tell everybody, where did you grow up? Please share your academic journey. And where did you attend college, and what degrees did you obtain?
Wow, that's a lot in
That's a lot.
relatively in the first question,
That's
my
right.
friend. Okay, well, let me see if I can recall all of those elements. So, the first of all, I would say I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. Um, and I attended a number of schools. I earned my Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Maryland. I went on to obtain a Master's of Business Administration from Loyola University, also in Maryland. And then I received my PhD in Health Policy from the University of Maryland as well. So, certainly a bit of an eclectic educational journey.
Wow. Very much so. Thank you. Dr. Jones, how has your leadership philosophy evolved across your roles as a college president, vice president of administrative services, and accreditation commissioner?
I would, I don't know that my quote unquote leadership style has evolved in any particular way. What I will say is that I had the opportunity when I was 25 to begin in an administrative capacity where I began leading people, being responsible for both resources as well as people. And so I have continued from that point to today to continue to learn and to try to be effective as a leader. One of the important lessons that I learned in one of the courses or various professional development experiences that I've had is this, and that is when it comes to systems and processes, one should seek to be efficient. When it comes to work with individuals, one should seek to be effective. And that really has stayed with me for many, many decades. And what does it mean to be effective with one person versus another person can look very, very differently. And so we have to be willing to listen, to learn, and to be flexible in terms of how we engage individuals from very, very diverse backgrounds, and not just from a social or economic or cultural backgrounds, but diverse in their thought and approach to engagement, approach to collaboration, approach to getting work done. And as a leader, you learn to be more flexible in terms of trying to take the time to discover how am I going to be effective working with this individual or with this group.
Wow. You know what? I've interviewed many scholars nationwide, but no one has ever talked about efficiency versus being effective. That is really a phenomenal perspective. My dear friend, what do you see as the most urgent challenges facing community college students today, and how should institutions adapt to meet those needs?
That's a really interesting question, Professor Henderson. You know, I think one of the challenges that many students face is just trying to figure out how to balance all of the other dimensions of their life along with being a college student. In an ever evolving, ever changing and challenging times, whether it's due to political, economic, social, or technological changes, being able to adapt to the very, very increased, complex, and changing world is a daunting task for anyone. And I think it's particularly challenging for community college students who oftentimes come from circumstances that can be very, very challenging in and of themselves. And then you add on the rigors and challenges associated with being a student, and then also coupled with the fact that they may not have a plethora of people in their lives that have made that journey ahead of them, and they don't have those same kinds of support systems and resources in order to navigate some of those challenging complexities that are all too present.
Wow, thank you for that. From your perspective as a commissioner, which is an awesome task with ACCJC, what are some of the most common misconceptions institutions have about the accreditation process?
Well, I think one of the big misconceptions is that it really is more aligned with checking boxes and making sure that you are doing certain things. While that is certainly part of that, and ensuring that there is the standards and requirements are being met, I think that that's obviously an important part of that. But what I think certainly ACCJC is much, much more interested in and has prioritized is student learning and continuous improvement.
Right.
I mean, I think that that's really, and that's the highest aspect of quality control, is being able to be mindful of what is your ultimate objective, which is student success and student learning, coupled with looking at the ways in which that work is being done and being in a posture to continuously assess and get better at it. No matter where you start that process, you can always improve and get better. And it's that pursuit that is most important. And that has to be intentional and operationalized as part of the overall fabric of the institution. It's not a one and done. You do it for the period of time that you're being up for your site visit and things like that, and then say, "Whoo, I've gotten it done. Now move on to regular business." No, it has to, it needs to be inculcated in the normative ways in which the work of the institution is being done, if it's to be done really, really effectively.
Wow, I remember during my instructional years, and one not so much during my acting dean year, I was fortunate enough to serve on two team sites.
Okay.
Team for
Nice.
the ACCJC, and I learned a lot about things I didn't even know. I had never really thought about the four major bullet points of accreditation.
Yeah.
And so I encourage all professionals in higher education, especially within the California community college system, to have that opportunity, because you will see it's a daunting task. Living in the current time as we do, where budgets are tight, community colleges often face tight budgets. What innovative financial strategies have you found most effective in sustaining student-centered initiatives?
That's, you know, I'm not sure that there's sort of any particular silver bullet when it comes to obtaining resources. I think having a significant amount of time spent dealing with financial matters, the couple of things that come immediately to mind. One is you have to have, I won't say you have to, but I think it's highly recommended that there is revenue diversification, meaning that you are not too heavily reliant on a single source of revenues, so that you have multiple streams of revenue. So if one begins to go down, you can work on trying to increase others. So having revenue diversification, I think, is really, really important. And what are some of those sources of revenues for colleges and universities, but in particular community colleges? Certainly it's tuition and fees, which you may or may not have control over to a high extent. But then it's also contracts and grants, sales and direct sales kinds of things, the auxiliary services kinds of sales and service kinds of functions that you would pursue. Contract education would be another one, and really understand the drivers of your dominant funding source. So for the California Community College, it's the student-centered funding formula, and that has multiple components. And looking at ways in which you can maximize the revenues based on the parameters of your funding formula is obviously another matter that pretends towards strong fiscal health. The other thing that I think is also really, really important is being able to make strategic investments in the long-term interest of the institution. And the last thing that I would say is being very, very thoughtful and mindful when it comes to controlling and managing the expense side of things, and maintain a good relationship between revenues and expenses. Unfortunately, several districts and colleges get upside down, and they allow their expenses to increase at a rate that is greater than the rate of increase of their revenues. And they create what we characterize as a structural deficit, meaning that what their ongoing operating costs are greater than their ongoing revenues. And that's a problem. And so when an institution finds itself in that kind of situation, it's not too long, if they don't take immediate actions to address that, it's not too long before they're having to make really, really difficult decisions, and or other people are telling them you have to do X, Y, or Z because you have no choice. And so I think that those are couple of things that I would mention when it comes to revenues and also fiscal management in general.
Unfortunately, that's a conversation that I'm sure you've heard over and over. I know in my many years of teaching and being in different institution sources, that's been always an issue: money. you know.
Oh yeah, it's very, very important. And while there are many important characteristics of an effective, college or university administrator, being fiscally minded and having good fiscal acumen has to be one of the biggest characteristic, at least in my opinion. And one of the things that I think is really, really important, particularly when it comes to higher ed senior administrators that are also a faculty member. I find that, if they don't do that job very, very well, they have the option typically of returning to a faculty position.
That's right.
Okay. However, the decisions that they make, if they make really, really bad decisions and they have to exit their administrative position, they have a safe landing place. The students and the classified staff and other administrators, they get booted out on the street because the institution can't afford to keep them any longer. But that faculty member who had risen to the position of chief executive officer or whatever will have a soft landing, and those individuals that are more rank and file will pay the ultimate price of their lack of effectiveness in their role as the leader, and particularly their lack of competency as a fiscal manager.
Wow, that is that brings up another episode. But I appreciate that, because that is the truth. Having stated that, Dr. Jones, how can community colleges better address equity gaps, particularly for historically underserved student populations?
I think there's a couple of different things, and I will say that, in my opinion, there's been a lot that the California community colleges have done in terms of closing equity gaps, and there has been some improvements. I think three things come immediately to mind. First thing that I think comes to mind is something that we're doing, that is addressing the matter of basic needs and helping. It's hard to focus on your studies when you're super hungry and you don't. It's hard to maintain that, or have a quiet, reasonable place to study and get your work done, or have the technology that you need in order to do that. The other thing is something that I mentioned previously, and that is having the requisite knowledge network that many students don't have. And I think we do a reasonable job of trying to cultivate that. The other thing is, and I think that we also provide a reasonable amount of resources for that. I think where I would say that we haven't done as good of a job, and that is many of the investments in terms of efforts to close equity gaps are programmatic, meaning that there's a program for let's say student equity and achievement, and there's another program for this. There isn't sort of this comprehensive strategy and significant investment at scale to help close those equity gaps. And I think that that's really what is needed, is a reimagining of what are the barriers to minority and underrepresented students from succeeding, and figure that out, and then make those resources available without stigma, without significant barriers to entry, at scale, and fund it as part of the base funding for the institution, not a separate, distinct program that's, some here, some there. It's not integrated. It's not as strategic as a strategy for being successful for that group of students at large. You'll have a program for Umoja for the Black students. You have Puente for the Latino students. You have APIs. Many of these students, their needs are similar. So come up with strategies that address all of those needs for those students that find themselves in those kinds of situations. That begins to, at scale, address the equity gap that exists. That's why it's existed for such a long time. I don't think that it's purely a function of the limit of the resource investments that have been made. It's the ways in which we've sought to solve the problem.
So in other words, come up with a more comprehensive plan that meets the needs of everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
That makes sense. I think that makes sense not only from a structural standpoint, but from a curriculum standpoint at all. As well. Right. Is that, look at all the different learning modalities that you could consider for the students. Having said that, what role should community college play in preparing students for rapidly changing workforce demands, especially in high growth sectors?
Why don't you repeat the question? I have a thought, but
what role should community colleges play in preparing students for rapidly changing workforce demands, especially in high growth sectors?
Well, I think that they should play a very, very important role, because particularly when it comes to areas that may not require a bachelor's degree. I think the thing that's important is that the overall education attainment level that is needed in order as our country and the world become increasingly complex is increasing. But it's stratified. Not everyone needs to be a PhD. Not everyone needs to have a master's, but but they need to learn and they need skills. And so if the community colleges, particularly in various growth areas that don't require, master's or PhD level, that's where the community colleges can really, really help, students acquire those skills. Now, the thing that I find challenging in fulfilling those roles is something that you as a faculty member probably can speak to better than I can. And that is, unfortunately, the process of developing and getting approved new courses of study is way too long. It does not move at the rate of industry, and that is a problem. So if we can do that, and the privates tend to do that better. Not that their education quality, I think that their education quality perhaps isn't nearly as good, but they can develop and deploy a curriculum of study far more rapidly, and it can be more nimble in terms of meeting the skill and knowledge demands of labor.
What I found, Dr. Jones, thank you for that. Very, very insightful response. But what I found that one of the challenges in all the many years that I taught was that you can come up with innovative curriculum and look at development curriculum from all these different teaching modalities. But the problem is everything always goes back to resources. And, you know, the institution says, create these programs, create these certificates. You create these certificates and create these programs that can help the students to, those who are not obtaining masters and PhDs. It helps them, give them immediate job skills, but then you turn around and there's no funding because of some mismanagement or a variety of issues that maybe it's not mismanagement, but for historical reasons why a particular district or college has problems financially. And so there's no money, or they're low enrollment. And so I find that it's extremely complex because there's not a marriage sometimes between common sense and what the needs of the students are, and the people, the entity that is affected the most are the students.
Well, you know, the thing is this. Here's a couple of thoughts that come to mind. So first of all, I think that while many institutions do in fact engage in, because it's part of requirements, generally speaking, under accreditation planning, I don't think that the quality of the education planning in alignment with resource planning is as integrated as it should be.
Right.
And I think that improving that would go a long way. I also think that that no matter what your current fiscal situation is as an institution, you always need to be making investments in what is going to be important for the long-term future and health of the institution. What does that mean? What does that mean is that even if you're having to reduce expenditures in certain areas, you're still going to invest in something that you believe is going to have a strong return on investment for the future of the institution. So you're going to still fund programs that you believe are going to be vital to the long-term interests of the college. If there is a program that really, really meets the needs of the students, and you believe will have within 2-3 years, whatever, substantial increase in enrollments, you do that. You make those strategic investment, but it has to be strategic, and those decisions have to be informed by empirical data and evidence that leads you to believe that that is actually likely to be the case, and not just the hopeful aspiration of a very, very enthusiastic professor.
That's right. Thank you for that. How do you approach building strong trust-based relationships with faculty, staff, community partners during periods of institutional change and downsizing?
Well, if you have to do that, so two things I would say. First of all is you have to build rapport and trust with them from the very beginning. And a couple of ways of doing that I found to be very, very important is, irrespective of who they are, whether it's a community member, whether it's a faculty, student, whoever, is you got to be willing to listen to them and learn from them. That's number one. The other thing is be consistent and fair. If faculty member X or community member Y comes to you and they want X, Y, or Z, whatever answer you give that person, that should be the exact same answer that you would give anyone else.
That's
you
right.
know, you don't cut side deals, or you don't do that. So And then the other thing is really have them to understand, if they're, whatever the processes are, you faithfully apply the processes and everything, because people have a concern when they think that things aren't fair, or they, even if they don't like the decision, if they understand the process that was used and it was clear what that process was, and that process is consistently always followed, even if they don't like the outcome, they respect it, and you get a far less pushback. The other thing that I would say is, high degree of participation. So if you're having to make these difficult decisions regarding resource reductions and things like that, that you invite a lot of people to weigh in. Be clear about whose decision it ultimately is. Okay, and then let people participate in that decision-making process. And I think that those are, I think, some of the things that I think will help in terms of making some difficult decision and being able to do it in a way that still builds trust. So, be honest, be consistent, be engaging, meaning involve other people, and just be a person of high integrity.
Very much so. I got just two or three more questions. Looking ahead, 10 to 15 years, what major shifts do you anticipate in the community college landscape, and how should leaders prepare?
Let me think for a minute. I think, well, the easy answer is would be something related to the need to sort of help people, quote unquote, retool as a result of the changes in terms of workforce related to artificial intelligence. I think that's sort of an easy answer. And I think it's true, obviously. But I also think that both from a policy, a fiscal, and legal environment, the work that we are doing is going to be continuously more complicated. And with that being said, I think colleges and universities will need to become much more adept at partnering and collaborating to solve societal and or community problems. And I think that's where there is a real opportunity, is to work in collaborations with communities to address community-defined challenges and problems that are complex and requires involvement and the collective knowledge and wisdom of a multiplicity of institutions and individuals to make any kind of meaningful strides at impacting those for good.
Well, Dr. Jones, you made a great impact on me, and during the years that I met you, and I've always deeply respected and cared for you. To me, what you're saying in a nutshell is that we can look forward to a breakdown of, especially in California, the three silos, and a more integration between the systems having to work together, because complexities for life in general and just for students are becoming so arduous and so complicated that the community college system, the UC system, and the CSU system at some point are going to have to continue to integrate and work more cohesively. And I believe that is going to happen. And that brings me to my final question, which is, what guidance would you offer to emerging higher educational professional leaders who aspire to obtain roles in executive administration or in accreditation?
Well, I would say I think I would turn it around and say, ask whoever, why do you want to do it? Why is that something that you aspire to? And if it's purely for the purpose of advancement, of career, then I think your focus is somewhat off the mark. I think the ones that really make the most difference is those who want to obtain those leadership positions because of the good that they hope to be able to do from that particular role or position. I might get this wrong, but I'm gonna try to remember it, and hopefully I remember the majority of it. There was president at Dartmouth, and he made a quote that's something like this. It says, "Don't expect to make a very, very strong or lasting impact using intellect without an equal measure of compassion and heart." And I think that that's right. If you really want, you can be the smartest person in the world, but if you don't have heart and don't have compassion for the work and those that with whom you are working and serving and supporting, you're not going to make a very strong or lasting impact. And so I think that that's really what matters. What's your heart? And why are you seeking to lead?
Dr. Jones, having worked in the UC system for 20 years, the community college on books for close to 38 years, and the CSU system for 13 years, your leadership to Sylvester Carl Henderson was a demonstration of heart. I will always be grateful for you allowing me the opportunity to work time as an administrator, because I learned a lot. It was a very eye-opening experience, and it was one that I will treasure in my soul. So having said that, I am so grateful to have crossed paths with you. And could you share any thoughts and ideas, or do you have any final thoughts and ideas you would like to share with our digital community?
I've had I've had the opportunity to do some of the things that I've done largely because of two things. One, God's goodness and grace. And two, the wonderful doors of opportunities that have been opened to me as a result of the education that I've been blessed to receive. And so, so I would say continue to learn, continue to grow, and always trust in the Lord. That's
You know what? Having said that, you have made my evening very insightful. And as the president of this podcast and my business entitled Professor for Life Incorporated, where we interview professors and administrators and professionals all over the world, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk to me and to allow me to share some of your jewels and some of your great perspectives. I do wish you a wonderful day in all that you do, and may God's blessings continue to shine upon your life. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Sylvester. Appreciate it.
God bless you. Bye-bye now.
God bless you.